All right, welcome to AI Explains. We're about to jump into a collection of texts that's done it all. It's shaped laws, it's inspired incredible art, it's even fueled revolutions. But what if I told you that most of us have been thinking about it completely wrong from the very start?
You know, it's pretty wild to think about. When the Roman Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the state religion, the Bible didn't just stay a sacred scroll. Nope, it started to become a legal blueprint. So many of its ideas, things like needing more than one witness or making sure the punishment fits the crime, they're not just old religious rules. They're literally woven into the DNA of Western law today.
And for centuries, I mean centuries, the Bible was basically the cultural story in the West. Think about it, Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel, Handel composing the Messiah. They were pulling from this collection of stories. It was the raw material for some of the greatest art we have, making these ancient tales come to life for everyone to see and hear. But here's the thing, its words have always been kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, they've been used to prop up kings and empires, but on the other, they've been a powerful rallying cry for freedom. That story of the Exodus, for example, it's been a fire in the belly of movements fighting oppression for ages, from the fight against slavery all the way to the civil rights movement.
And its influence is so deep, so embedded in our culture that a lot of the time we don't even see it. We use phrases like an eye for an eye or the writing on the wall all the time. We tell stories about good Samaritans. It's all part of this shared cultural language we use whether we know where it came from or not.
So that begs the question, right? How did this one collection of ancient texts get so incredibly powerful? It's a huge question, and the answer, well, it starts by fixing one simple, fundamental mistake. A mistake that, once you see it, changes everything.
Okay, here it is. This is the big idea, the single most important thing to get. So many of us, when we think of the Bible, we approach it all wrong. The key, the real secret, isn't to think of it as just one book. It's to see it as something way more complex and honestly, way more fascinating.
This right here just hits the nail on the head. The Bible isn't a book, it's a library. Seriously, just let that sink in. The moment you stop thinking of it as one single volume and start seeing it as a library, with different shelves, different authors, all from different times, the whole thing just cracks wide open.
And if it's a library, that forces you to ask a really important question every time you open it. What kind of book am I reading right now? What's its genre? I mean, you wouldn't read a technical manual the same way you read a love poem, right? Of course not. And applying that same common sense here, well, that's the first step to actually understanding what's going on.
And wow, what a library it is. It has got everything. You've got the Torah, which is basically a legal and social blueprint for a nation. You have these epic histories, but they're not just history for history's sake. They're written with a theological point. Then you've got the raw, gut-wrenching poetry of the Psalms, the deep philosophical drama of Job, the fiery social critiques of the prophets. The list just goes on. You have to read each one on its own terms.
All right, so if it's a library, that leads to a pretty obvious next question. Who were the librarians? Who got to decide which books made it onto the shelves and which ones got left behind? I mean, these were some seriously high-stakes decisions.
So this wasn't some tidy committee meeting where they all voted. It was a messy process that took centuries, and it was usually sparked by a major crisis. Like when the Babylonians invaded and sent the people into exile. Suddenly they needed to write their stories down to survive. It became like a portable homeland for them. Later, when the Romans destroyed their temple, the sacred text became the new center of their faith. And then a guy named Marcion came along and tried to create his own edited version of the scriptures, which basically forced the early church to say, okay, hold on, we need to officially decide what's in and what's out. So over a few hundred years, the early Christian communities developed this kind of informal checklist. It had three main points. First, was it connected to an apostle or someone who knew them? They called that apostolicity. Second, did it line up with what churches were teaching everywhere? That's orthodoxy or right belief. And finally, was it being used and accepted pretty much universally? That's Catholicity. Was everyone from Rome to Egypt reading this thing? If a text checked all three boxes, it had a really good shot of making the cut. So after all this time, this long organic process, the dust finally settled. And in the year 367, a bishop named Athanasius wrote a letter that listed exactly 27 books. And that list, that's the New Testament we have today. It's the one that's been used by almost all Christians ever since.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. This whole library idea, it perfectly explains why the Bible has had such a, well, contradictory effect on the world. Because you have all these different books from different times all sitting on the same shelf, people can pick and choose and use them in completely opposite ways.
I mean, check this out. In one corner of the library, you've got the book of Deuteronomy, with these ancient commands to wage holy war. But then you walk over to another section and you find the Gospels, where Jesus says to love your enemies. They're both in the same collection, and throughout history, people have absolutely chosen which one they wanted to listen to. And we see this exact same dynamic in more recent history. Think about slavery in America. Pro-slavery preachers would twist a story from Genesis, the curse of Ham, to argue that God was okay with it. It's horrible. But at the exact same time, enslaved people were drawing incredible hope and strength from the Exodus story, seeing in it a promise that God sides with the oppressed and sets people free. See? The library has books that can be used as a weapon and books that can be used as a key to liberation.
But here's the thing. This story isn't over. This isn't just ancient history we're talking about. The story of how we read and interpret this library is still being written. And right now, a massive technological revolution is making us ask all these old questions in a brand new way.
You know, if you think about it, the story of this library has always been tied to technology. Going from scrolls to bound books was a huge deal. Then the printing press changed everything. Then the internet. Each step changed how we could access and think about these texts. And now we have artificial intelligence. And this might be the biggest shift of all.
So let's compare. A human reader, a scholar, a scribe, they read slowly. They're looking for meaning, for context. They argue with the text. An AI, our new digital scribe, works on a totally different level. It is unbelievably fast. It can spot patterns across millions of words in a second. But, and this is a huge but, it has absolutely no real understanding of the human heart, the human experience that produced those words. And this really gets to the heart of it. An AI's data recall is practically perfect. It can quote anything you want flawlessly. But ask it for contextual understanding? Not so much. Ask it for empathy, for wisdom? Zero. It has none. It can process every single word, but it can't feel the agony in a lament or the soaring hope in a prophet's vision. It just can't.
Which leaves us with one last pretty provocative thought. We are now entering an age where algorithms can search this library, summarize it, and even add new books to it. So we have to ask ourselves, in this new digital version of the library, who or what is going to be our librarian?